But generally, we're heading in a particular direction, which says, okay, well, free speech needs to be guaranteed. Again, the most important way to guarantee free speech is to not develop mechanisms which can prohibit free speech. Okay, go. I can only see your eyes. So.
Are you gonna talk about? Are you done with free speech now? Or are you
yeah, we're never going to talk about it again. I was going to move on a little bit. Go ahead.
Well, I think the problem in the U.S. isn't that the government prevents free speech as much as that certain actors have way more speech than others.
But that would be changed once we hit a participatory economy.
But not sufficiently. So yeah, that is the direction they're moving. How do we guarantee? Well, let's put it this way. Okay, let's look at a participatory economy. And I know that our understanding here for most folks who are just getting involved is there's so much that's being taken in, and it's really hard to picture how practical things would take place. But there would be media institutions. Newspaper publishers, a whole range, radio, TV, everything.
I mean, under free speech, would there be any censorship?
No, that's my point. Is that we can't have government censorship,
right,
ever,
right,
of speech alone. Certain types of speech that are directly violent or whatever, maybe, but I mean the point is that the government doesn't ever develop a mechanism to censor.
So there's no FCC.
Well, I mean,
Federal Communications.
well, it's interesting because that,
bandwidth or something?
right? I mean,
Yeah,
they regulate in all sorts of ways, but they're not just the censors.
Well, yeah.
So would there be something akin to the FCC? Well, presumably we'd have something that actually did say, well, we're going to assign frequencies, for radio and television and whatever other kinds of broadcasts, right? So I mean, there's nothing authoritarian about that if it's done in a way that people have access.
Right.
So any institution like that is going to be, and the FCC, if you look at the way it's designed, it's actually it almost looks like the intent of it is to guarantee access. If you look at how that plays out in reality and how freaking hard it actually is to get access, that's where the difficulty is. So we rewrite that stuff. And you can. Some of these things are simple. When we look at the parallel version in our society of this institution, let's look where it came from. Congress designed that. Okay, Congress said you all are going to go in and create this institution that can regulate this stuff. Congress made sure that the people who did that were people who were going to be responsive to corporate interests, because that's what Congress's job is today. So in this society, we're going to have communities with direct democracy appointing and electing people to go in and make those decisions. It doesn't mean that it comes through a community forum that, every time someone wants a radio station, we have to approve it, and 70% of the population has to show up to vote and this and that. But we are going to, there's going to be some shorthand, but we're going to say we want direct accountability from the people who are making that decision. When we set up those institutions instead of Congress doing it, they will be different. It doesn't mean that some of the functions aren't similar, but they won't have the power to censor, which the FCC does have today. This is my guess, right? This is my hope for what we can do. But it's interesting because we might actually have to have institutions that complement where the economy lacks. And where does the economy lack? Well, your speech has to be valued in order for the economy to provide you access. All right, it's pretty easy to get your speech valued if you can get people to start hearing you, but you're not going to be able to publish a newspaper in a participatory economy if nobody yet has any interest in it, unless the participatory economy decides that it does value dissent, which we don't have any reason to necessarily believe is going to be the case. Because we're looking at material conditions, we're looking at material factors and economic factors, and some of these political factors don't necessarily play out in the economy. When we go into the polity, we put our political hats on, and that's where we're going to start realizing some of these things that are more philosophical and more political than they are economic. So maybe the polity is where we come up with an institution that actually seeks out dissent, that actually plays devil's advocate, that actually supports or funds the ability to get some of those words out, or even the ability to just discuss alternative ideas.
I have a question. In a free market economy, there's the ideology that any intrusion on the free market from the political sphere is damaging to the economy. So what, in terms of participatory economics, does an intrusion from the political sphere, what effect does that have on the way that the system will function?
If we have And this could have come up at any point, and I'm surprised that people haven't actually said exactly that. I mean, what we're designing, and remember, I talked about this in Political Vision 1, I think in each of the classes it was mentioned to some extent. What we're realizing is that when we get to politics, we look at that and it's a unique sphere because most of what politics might end up having to do is make up for the slack from what hasn't been done in the other spheres, right? So when we look at violence between people, when we look at the way societies relate to one another even, when we look at possibly having to check the economy's ability to violate our ethical, ecological principles and things like that. In every instance, really what we're seeing is that the polity is stepping in where those spheres are not adequate, where the institutions in those spheres are not adequate to yield the results that we really do want, that we on some formal level know we want. So that's where the value of having the political system be able to step in is. When we get to strategy, we're going to realize how we're going to highlight the ways, the concerns that we actually have about political manipulation of these other institutions, be it economic or kinship or cultural. I mean, we'll actually get to those first when we talk about education. So our political system needs to be kept in check, and it needs to be able to keep itself in check. Okay, but it is in turn used primarily to keep other institutions in check as well. So if the participatory economy is not able to guarantee free speech, and by that I don't just mean that you can say whatever you want, but you can have people hear it. You can have people see it in a newspaper. You can have people here and there. Doesn't mean even that we're going to step into other institutions and say your television station has to let this wacko, which maybe the person is, express their ideas. But what we do have to do is find a way that those ideas can get out there, because in our society we have to do this now on the left, and we'll have to do it in the future until the end of history. We will have to make sure that every idea can have its day. Otherwise, we have no reason to believe that ours are correct, or that ours are, preferable even. Okay, so that's what the political system might have to do in this situation. It might have to actually have an institution, seeks out dissent, even instigates dissent. And we have a devil's advocate institution of some kind that says we're going to have some kind of funding from the polity that people have set aside to make sure that everybody with a crazy idea can have some degree of access. The economy might say it's wasteful. The economy is going to say, you know what, if we print newspapers for these idiots, if we have Idiot Weekly, it's a disaster. It offsets everything. Nobody wants their consumption moved there. But in a political setting, we can look at that and say we value that so much that we need to subsidize it. We need to subsidize dissent, and that would be an indication of a radical society that I think that would be a major factor in, as simple as it sounds, recognizing that a society is really, really doing something amazing. And to the extent that societies have guaranteed that, third parties and dissident parties are funded and all sorts of stuff like that, that's where we can start to see that there actually is some radicalism going on. There actually is some belief in something that could truly be called self-management and free speech.
Now I have one more question about that to follow up.
I knew you would.
Does that mean also that people would be doing that as their job? Like, they would be pursuing dissident speech, like, so not only is it economically wasteful in the first place, but then they're also not only are they being provided the resources, but they're being remunerated for it as well.
Oh, well, you might not get remunerated for being a wacko, no. But you probably would get remunerated for being the person who seeks out the wackos.
Actually, I just wanted to answer that.
Please do.
That? Because you said, what constitutes an intrusion from the polity? The only sacred things about the party con are the balanced job complexes, the planning process that everyone's involved in, and the councils. So if the polity interferes in those things, that's probably a problem. But otherwise, I would think not. Like if it acts to unbalanced job complexes, that would be.
Well, because at a certain point I could see it as happening. If you have to cut down too many trees and involve people in work that's too onerous to provide resources for everybody who has, an axe to grind, then I can see it as really making, damaging the economic system. I just wonder, how that
well, yeah, and not only that, but no one else has this sort of special attention to advocacy of their speech. So in other words, the majorities who are 9 times out of 10 going to prove to be the ones who had the preferable opinion on a certain issue or whatever.